The province of Gauteng is ready and excited to host the Africa Investment Forum in November 2018. Gauteng's Premier David Makhura says it's time to stop talking and start acting on addressing the infrastructure gap in Africa. He was at the launch of the forum addressing the media.
We have just launched the Africa Investment Forum, which is going to be the investment forum, the investment marketplace, the premier investment marketplace for Africa. What is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to leverage global pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and other institutional investors to invest heavily in Africa. Africa today has an infrastructure financing deficit of anything between $67 billion to $107 billion every year. However, if you look at the amount of assets under management, globally, by 2020, 2030, it will be at least 112 trillion US dollars. So all Africa needs to do is to leverage a little bit of that, and we will close all of that infrastructure investment gap. So the Africa Investment Forum will be very, very unique. It's not going to be a talking shop at all. It's 100% transactional.
In less than 40 years from now, Africa's growing population is expected to expand exponentially. Here's why it is so important to get going with infrastructure projects.
Today you have roughly 1.2 billion people. If you look at the cities, there's massive amount of migration from rural areas to the urban areas. So it's putting a lot of pressure on water, on sanitation, on the need for transport, on energy, and so that means that that number continues to rise. Secondly, it's just the fact that Africa itself has been underinvested in infrastructure and not planning enough to cope with that rapid increase in population over time. And thirdly, is that infrastructure for a long time has always been left to government alone. But in fact, you can build airports by the private sector, you can build roads by the private sector, you can do water and sanitation provided by the private sector. So what is unique now, and what has changed, is that in many African countries, the governments recognize that governments alone cannot do the job. And therefore you need the government and you need the private sector. But the private sector face a lot of risks. They face financial risk, they face project risk, they face market risk, they also face political risk. So somebody has to be de-risking, reducing the risk of investment by the private sector. And that is why this Africa Investment Forum is very, very crucial. For us at the African Development Bank, we also have set up a private equity vehicle to keep investing more in infrastructure. It's called Africa 50. We have mobilized $860 million so far for that private equity vehicle, and we want to increase that to about $3 billion in the short term. And so when you take that and you combine it with the massive effort we are doing today to leverage global pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and other institutional investors outside and within Africa to invest in infrastructure for Africa, I think we'll make a lot more progress in closing that infrastructure gap.
The Premier of Gauteng Province, David Makhura, reiterated why Gauteng and the city of Johannesburg in particular won the bid to hold this important forum this year.
This investment conference or forum could have been held anywhere in the continent. There were cities that and regions that worked very hard. It could have gone to East Africa, could have gone to West Africa. Even in South Africa, it could have been in Cape Town or Durban. But we put a very strong bid, and we're able to demonstrate that as a province, we have a capacity to host a conference, an African investment forum of this magnitude. Partly because of the work that we ourselves are already doing in the continent. We understand the continent very well. I was able to demonstrate that there are more than 200 Gauteng-based companies that are doing business in our continent, already investing in our continent more than $30 billion across the different regions of Africa. And we are working with the different governors and city mayors across the continent. But we also have a good experience about hosting significant conferences or forums of this magnitude. We have good infrastructure. We are the financial nerve center of the continent, with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange being here. So anything investment, huge amounts of investment coming, we are best placed to do that. But we also run a slick machine here. We have an investment center that helps facilitate the applications and make it easy for people to do business. So that's the case we put, and we are very pleased that we have been appointed as the host of this conference. Government, the Gauteng government and its municipalities and the national government are going to make sure that this is a very successful conference.
Sheena Mohammed for Joburg Today.